Welcome back from your break, everyone. So I know that people will be trickling back in. So I just wanted to sort of summarize what this next segment will be. We just had some great discussions about using virtual public involvement to reach underserved communities. And now, if you remember the first day's session last Tuesday, we had a roundtable with presentations from the state DOT partners talking about how they have been using virtual public involvement and also how they plan to use virtual public involvement going forward. And so now it's the opportunity to hear from our local partners, the MPOs, RPOs, and COGs. And we have a number of presentations, both live, virtual, and recorded presentations that we'll be sharing with you. And so I'm going to ask Larissa to, Larissa, I don't know if you've had a chance to turn on your camera today and say hi to the group, but why don't you go ahead and do that now? And Larissa will sort of be facilitating this segment.
Hi, I'm Larissa. I'm working with the Volpe Center and helping Federal Highways put on this webinar. So I'm going to share my screen with the first of our presentations. I believe this is from Stratford, MPO in New Hampshire, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Shana Sylvia, and I am the Communications and Outreach Planner at Stratford Regional Planning
Can we
Commission.
pause for a second and maybe turn up the volume if there's a way to turn up the volume on that? Okay. And if those of you who are viewing this are having trouble hearing the volume, you may also need to turn up your computer or Teams volume as well. So if we could just back up to the very beginning of this presentation, we'll start again. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Hi, I'm Shana Sylvia, and I am the Communications and Outreach Planner at Stratford Regional Planning Commission in New Hampshire. We work with 18 different communities in Stratford County, Rockingham County, and Carroll County, and we are also a metropolitan planning organization. We really dove into looking at tools and techniques for virtual public involvement during our Communities for Healthy Aging Transitions project. We were about to launch into a lot of in-person outreach and had to rethink all of our strategies because of the pandemic. This is a project that's funded by the Tufts Health Plan Foundation, and one of the key domains we were looking at to get feedback for was transportation. So we had to kind of strategize and think how we could still get people in a room without physically getting them in a room. So using Zoom for a lot of our meetings, we thought the breakout feature from Zoom would be a great strategy for that. We even saw more participation than we probably would have in person at some events, which was great. And those small breakout rooms allowed people to really dive into certain topics like accessibility and infrastructure. And we used a Microsoft form for our facilitators, so they were able to type in the feedback during those sessions and just submit it. And we had it all in one place on the back end after our events, which was great. We also use a survey, which is obviously a common tool we all normally use, and we did a digital survey using SurveyMonkey, and that was really helpful to get additional feedback. So this not only went into our chat project looking at aging in our region, but we were also at the same time working on our Metropolitan Transportation Plan and our Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. So a lot of the data surrounding transportation and some of the other themes we were able to pull into those plans as well, which was great. So it's just kind of been a learning experience, and some of these tools and techniques we're definitely going to be using in the future. We also, for the first time, put together a video about the project, and this was a short 5-minute video detailing the project, what it entailed, what our outreach was looking to be, and we would show it at the beginning of each forum. So I thought, without further ado, I would show that video. I am actually not live and in person at this training today. We actually have a kickoff for another project. But if you have any questions, I will be here at the next session, or feel free to email me at srpc@stratford.org. Let's chat. My name is Shayna Sylvia and I work with Stratford Regional Planning Commission. We are here to tell you about an exciting project called Communities for Healthy Aging Transition, or CHAT. This is a 2-year project funded by the Tufts Health Plan Foundation to further their mission of improving healthy living with an emphasis on older people. They have funded similar projects with the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission and Southwest Region Planning Commission, who have done great work in assessing communities and also carrying out pilot projects. Our mission with this project is to assess how age-friendly communities are and to explore ways to make our region more welcoming, adaptive, inclusive, and safe for people of all ages. We will look at recreation and public spaces, diversity, community events and organizations, employment and volunteer opportunities, connectivity and accessibility, and lots of other factors. CHAT is a collaboration between Stratford Regional Planning Commission and Stratford County Public Health Network. Stratford County Public Health Network seeks to improve the health, wellness, and quality of life for all individuals in Stratford County, New Hampshire, by building one integrated system of community members, businesses, and health organizations working together to address public health needs. Stratford Regional Planning Commission's mission is to ensure that the region is responsive to the needs of its residents through plans that foster sustainable development and improve quality of life. Both Stratford Regional Planning Commission and Stratford County Public Health Network have unique approaches to their work that complement each other, and we are excited to team up to develop innovative, age-friendly community resources, strategies, and projects.
My name is Ashley DeRocher and I work for Stratford County Public Health Network. I'm really excited about this partnership for the CHAT project because in public health, really what we do is all about building relationships and collaborating. And this is an opportunity to build a relationship with another organization that has a really similar mission. And it's also an opportunity to chat with our communities and leverage all of our partnerships to create change for healthy aging in our region.
Our steering committee is a big part of what we do. They inform our outreach, our reporting, and a lot of our decisions. We worked hard to create a diverse group for this project that includes representatives from a wide array of community organizations. We have representatives from Seacoast Outright, UNH Institute on Disability, Dover Teen Center, Community Partners, UNH Cooperative Extension, and Stratford County Community Action Partnership, among others.
Hey everyone, Steve Papajohn here from the Dover Teen Center. I just want to take a moment and talk about chat and how important chat is to the work that I'm doing. If you think about our aging populations, and then you think about our kids, all too often the two never connect. And I think that's what this is about for me, is really giving our seniors and our aging population folks in our community a chance to connect with kids. Make sure some of those stories don't go untold, those life experiences that they can share. There's a lot of really good stuff there, and I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be engaged.
It is important for communities across northern New England to leverage the wisdom and strengths of older people. The percent of our population that is 50 plus is growing. In fact, the 80 plus segment is growing the fastest. I'm very excited about the opportunities and impact the Communities for Healthy Aging Transitions initiative will have on our quality of life and economy. Working together alongside other efforts, we can make our communities a great place for all ages to live, work, and play.
And now for the project outcomes. We'll be chatting with citizens in each of the 18 communities using different outreach approaches such as surveys, virtual focus groups, individual interviews, and meetings with municipal staff. This will be paired with a look at existing information and data available. After, we will create a report for each community. These reports will provide context around questions like, how does your community provide an inclusive, welcoming, supportive, and healthy environment for people of all ages? Or do you have access to transportation for medical appointments or to get groceries? They will also provide an overview of strengths and opportunities relative to providing high quality of life for people of all ages.
Hi, my name is Nancy and I'm the Equity Engagement Planner at Stratford Regional Planning Commission. Our second phase, we're going to work with 4 of our 18 communities to write an action plan, which will be a more detailed, in-depth plan for your community so that you can start thinking about projects, thinking about changes, thinking about making it a more livable community, improving upon strengths that you already have, and improving capacity. The final phase will be working with 2 different communities on a pilot project. So these will be projects that we hope to actually implement within, or at least get them to the stage of implementation within the last phase of our project. We are so excited to start working with all of you and talking to you. Let's hear what you've got to say.
Wow. So, Larissa, before we start the next recorded presentation, I know Shayna is not with us here today for Q&A, but that actually works out pretty well. Our next session on Tuesday, August 3rd, we are going to be focusing on project visualizations and also do-it-yourself videos. And so we'll have an opportunity, hopefully, to hear more from Shayna and the Stratford the Stratford RPC. And so if you do have questions and you want to make sure you don't forget it for 2 weeks from now, go ahead and put your questions into the chat pod now. We won't be able to get them answered today, but we'll bring them back up next time we meet again in 2 weeks. So, and Larissa, back to you for our next presentation.
Yes, so our next presentation is an informal presentation from Chittenden County RPC. So if you guys just want to turn on your cameras and unmute yourselves, you can go right ahead.
I do. Hello, everyone, and hi, Larissa. I actually did put together some slides because this is about virtual presentation, so I don't know if there's a way to share my screen with folks. So as I talk about different things, I can say, here's an example of it.
Yes, just 1 second.
Sure, I'll sit tight.
And so I'll sort of explain what's going on while we're sort of working on that. One of the features of Microsoft Teams is that you can designate facilitators in the meeting and just participants. And so participants are not able to share their screen, and this helps to prevent people from inadvertently sort of cutting off the facilitators if they're sharing their screens. So Larissa, you're just making Brian a facilitator now, and I think, Brian, you should be able to share your screen now.
I am. I just have to find
so it's
all of the
top,
windows.
it's a little
Yeah, well, I found out. I just have to find the presentation on all the stuff that's open. Yeah. Okay, how are we looking?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so again, my name is Brian Davis. I'm a transportation planner with the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission in Northwest Vermont. And thank you for all the information in day 1 and day 2. This is great to hear, and I'll probably do my best to build on this. For each of these projects, there's only about 10 slides or so. I'll talk about 1 or 2 VPI tools for each one, but like most of you, we're doing a bunch of different tools for each of our projects. So don't feel like we're just choosing one for each of these. In the city of Burlington, we're working with the school district to do a walk audit for 9 different schools in the district. And we have an Esri package, and one of those tools with Esri is Survey 123, so you can incorporate mapping tools with a survey. So we built this mobile platform that families and students, as they're traveling to and from school, can have their phone out and drop a pin on a map like this one about there's ponding at this ADA ramp, or there's some issue that needs to be addressed. There's ice on the sidewalk every year here. You can take a photo of the issue and include it in there, and also just do some other different survey tools. So this allows us to engage people of all ages in the neighborhood or in the schools, as they're doing this. And the project team did this as well on our own devices. Also in Burlington, we did a corridor study of Winooski Avenue, which is nearly 2 miles long, goes through the heart of downtown, goes through different neighborhoods of all kinds and mixed use, and recognizing that not everyone views things the same way. Cross sections may not make a lot of sense, or plan view, just hard to see. The consultant used a 3D visualization tool so people could fly over the corridor, pan around, zoom in and out to really see what the proposed alternatives would look like, sort of in real time, in real life. And also for this, we were talking about different projects earlier. Something we did with the public library was we just set up posters with all the alternatives as a week-long display in the library with different materials. People could just go in and out. There's a local bike shop at the other end of the corridor that does a lot of transportation equity work and bikes as transportation. We set up some displays there at that shop and left it up, but I also staffed that for a few hours here and there. So people that were walking in, we could talk about that. So it's a very diverse core in terms of residents, businesses, people, and so on. And we wanted to reach them in as many ways as possible. For the RPC ourselves, our regional plan is called the ECOS plan. It's the Transportation Plan, Economic Development Plan, and Land Use Plan. And each year we track over 100 indicators, and we put those online. And this is a snapshot of different things that you can click to get different bar charts. This is currently hosted on a platform called Clear Impact, but I think we're going to migrate this to Esri Hub, so that's a little different experience for the users. We have a DDI, Diverging Diamond Interchange, in the works for Exit 16, and this is a state Vermont Agency of Transportation project that we're helping with. Interactive tools on the website. This is sort of an intro video that allows you to experience what it's like to navigate that. There's also some interactive maps where you can click some of those pins and you can see what is the current conditions are like. In this example, it's walking and biking, lack of infrastructure for the center pass. You can also see the proposed improvements and what that will look like. Again, another City of Burlington project in the Old North End, which is very diverse, very mixed use, low income, racially diverse. This looked at stormwater improvements, walking and biking improvements at different places throughout the neighborhood. This project started pre-pandemic and then transitioned. We had to continue on during the pandemic, so we used a number of different tools. We did a pre-recorded video for this with closed captioning. We also translated that into 4 of the major languages in the neighborhood. For the project posters, we included these QR codes so that people could pull up concepts like this. This shows an example with English on one side, but we translated those into the 4 different languages. So as people are in the field, in their neighborhood, they could click the QR code and pull up the concepts with descriptions in their languages. The caveat with this is we were in a time crunch. I used Google Translate to do it, and I've been told numerous times, like, it's not very good. So we are better now working with our local partners that have translation assistance. As you might imagine, they are overwhelmed right now, but they are expanding their capacity. So we're looking for some of these different tools that may help automate this process when we are unable to use some of the local people to do this for us. This another project, we use Wikimaps, printed in online surveys to capture some of the feedback, which worked for us. One of the other tools, we use this platform called Conveyo. It used to be called Civicomment, but you can put a PDF of a report, or in this case, our concepts, online. People can go to this and drop pins, make comments. They can like or dislike other people's comments. So it's sort of like a Wikimap, but it uses sort of this PDF format for people to engage in that way. I mentioned Wikimaps and surveys. I'm sure we all have experience with those, but they're very valuable in collecting a lot of data at people's convenience. You can see what other people have made. You can draw pins. People could draw lines where they want these walking and biking connections. This is in the town of Richmond, just outside of Burlington. For our regional active transportation plan and other project, we've used Wikimaps. So it is a good mapping tool for us to use. One of our major projects right now is looking at the I-89 corridor and some of the exits that go through Chittenden County. This affects not only just the 2 municipalities, the city of Burlington and the city of South Burlington, but so many people travel through that corridor that we needed a really robust public involvement process using pre-recorded presentations, interviews with public access TV. We're holding a number of different focus groups with some different populations. We used, French-speaking people. We had Arabic-speaking people with the translator on Zoom. It was very interesting. And the bike shop I mentioned earlier, they have a transportation equity group, a focus group with them that represent all kinds of different populations. And then again, these other different virtual meetings with business owners, stakeholder groups, some of the municipal committees like the walk bike committees and so on. So very very important project to us. We want to get all the voices at the table if we can. The challenges that we've been talking about during these sessions, broadband coverage, the rural access for cell, not everyone has internet. The apps are proving to be useful for that when we don't have coverage, making sure that tools work for all kinds of devices, you know, even using the postal mail to send surveys out or links to online surveys to do things in different languages so people are aware that projects are happening. I mentioned the Conveyo online PDF comment tool. May seem simple enough to some, other people just didn't understand how to interact with that. So we need to make sure that we're using a bunch of different tools that reach people of all kind. People that don't engage in traditional ways, you know, I'm trying to work more with the local schools and how to work with the PTOs and the school newsletter to get people involved that, you know, even if it's a pre-recorded video, it just doesn't work, you know, how to get people aware of a project that's happening in their neighborhood. Given our diversity of languages, we have people that speak a language that's not a written language. So we're trying to figure out the best way to engage with those people. And one of the bullets on this is using WhatsApp. A lot of people use apps like that to communicate with each other. I've heard of organizations using recorded voice messages in native languages that can be shared with different people. We haven't done that ourselves, but it's very interesting that that's an option. And so forums like these workshops we're in today, just to share this information, is like, oh, right, we can try that. That'd be great. As we're now shifting into these hybrid meetings, just getting better at doing that. Our organization has the OWL. Not all of us have had the opportunity yet to work with that tool. So we're still tinkering with the settings to get it to work well for people who are remote and not in the room yet. And then just establishing those the communications and the connections with the local community, whether it's a service organization, an advocacy organization. In our refugee resettlement population, there are different leaders that come out, you know, for their communities, and so engaging with them to help share the word about projects and get feedback from them is important for us. So that's sort of a snapshot of what we are working on, and happy to continue that conversation. So thank you.
Wow, Brian, so don't run away just yet. I'm anticipating that we have some questions for you. I certainly do. Okay, so Kevin has one. So I'll ask you Kevin's question first. Do you have any concerns about using WhatsApp for public input or feedback, given that it's encrypted?
Right. Well, you know, again, we don't have that experience with it yet. It just came up probably a month or so ago in a different community, that talking with people, how do we engage with the traditionally underserved and overburdened populations? And that was one idea. So we haven't engaged with that yet, but I look forward to other people's suggestions on that or other tools that we can use.
Yes, so not just questions, but any suggestions for Brian would be really greatly appreciated. And while we're waiting for any hands raised or comments typed in the chat, my question, Brian, you had mentioned that you were planning to switch from Clear Impact to Esri Hub. And so could you, for those of us who are not familiar with what this Esri product is, could you just kind of give a brief description, and then maybe talk a little bit about your decision-making process? What's driving this shift over from one platform to another?
Well, if I was in a conference room at work with other staff members, I could say, Regina, could you please answer that question? So I don't have an answer to that, but I'm happy to find out more about that product and our decision-making to go there. But from what I understand, it will be a better user experience. It's more map-based and has more numeric indicators. I think that was a limitation with the Clear Impact platform, but I'm happy to get back to you with that.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any other questions for Brian or some input for him? If you have experience with, I know in the day one session, we did have some discussions around hybrid meetings, and a couple of folks had mentioned using OWL. But this topic of, you know, how to engage with communities where, you know, they really maybe don't have, you know, you can't engage with them in sort of written format. That's one that we haven't talked about specifically, and I'm wondering, Tina, if you have thoughts on that or experiences with that. Not to put you on the spot, but
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
yeah. So, you know, do you have an experience with, or have you heard of others who've had experience working with communities where, you know, you can't really rely on written materials?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have. And I haven't heard, let me turn my camera on. You know, I think what I found is sort of like what Brian's referring to is that you try one method and see if it works, you know. So I have heard feedback like that, but my suggestion is to just keep trying. And I also wanted to comment on the WhatsApp. I am familiar with people of foreign descent that rely on that tool, and I think that's good that that came across, you know, your planning table, because that is a tool that's referenced or relied on for people out of the country. I have a friend that lived in Chittenden County, and she's relocated to another country, and that is her primary means of communication. So I can see that impacting the Chittenden County community.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your presentation, Brian. It was fascinating. You guys are working on so many and using so many different tools.
Yeah, and I'll offer one more thing. I saw, I think it was Catherine's question in the chat earlier in the day about, I think it was related to stipends, you know, or compensation of some sort. And in our last update of our public participation plan some years ago, we heard from populations that were like, you need to pay people for their experience. You got to pay people to show up. And so we did include that policy for volunteers serving on project committees. And now we're also figuring out other ways to use that to get more people. For example, the focus groups. If people are offering their time at a focus group, you know, they need to be compensated for that. And it's, you know, it's not just to provide compensation to help cover a transportation cost or childcare or something, but to also for that time you may lose that not being at your job, you know, for that hour or two that you're spending with us. So, and I can share that with y'all. It'll be updated again. We're working with a racial equity consultant to help update not only that particular policy, but the public engagement plan, as well as our other major plans.
That is great, Brian. Thank you so much for being willing to share that resource. And as a reminder to all our participants, we are sort of trying to gather whatever guidance, policy, resources that you might be able to share with others who are participating in this peer exchange. And the last day or last fourth day of this peer exchange, we'll have a general discussion on institutionalizing the use of VPI, and a very important part of that is having policies and guidance in place. So yeah, that will be a great resource. Thank you, Brian. I also wanted to point to one comment that Catherine just put in, that communities with a high proportion of deaf community members might struggle with written resources, since American Sign Language is their first language and not English. So there are many, many things to take into account depending on the particulars of, you know, and demographics of your community. So thanks for bringing that up, Catherine. All right, back to Larissa.
Okay, thank you. And so our next presentation is from the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. So I'm going to share my screen, and we can go ahead with the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jahaira Caxirena. I'm a Transportation Project Manager at the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission. You can go ahead, Larissa. Thank you. So, for you to have an idea, we are in the heart of Massachusetts. We are in the central portion of the region. We have borders with Connecticut and Rhode Island. Our region is comprised of 39 communities and the city of Worcester. We are about 500,000 inhabitants. in our region. And our transportation, our public outreach is mostly geared towards the long-range transportation plan, the transportation improvement program, and the unified work planning program as well. And we support the Regional Transit Authority in all the public outreach activities and events. Next one, please.
One moment, please. Yahara, is there a way that you could adjust the microphone volumes? I think folks are having a little bit of difficulty hearing you.
Oh, okay. So it's now better?
There is a setting in MS Teams. If you go to there should be a next to the sort of reactions icon, there should be three dots. If you click on that in the drop-down menu, there's a little COG icon that says device settings. And so if you click on that, there should be a place for you to adjust your microphone settings.
So I'm gonna put it all the way to the end. Is that good?
I think that's much clearer for me and hopefully for everyone else. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the collaboration with MassDOT. Derek presented the Engage tool last week, so I'm not going to get into much details about that. But I like to say that we are like the boots on the ground because we help with the updates on the accessible meeting locations, the contact list, and that type of things. And also we use the Engage tool specifically to determine what type of strategies are we going to use in the different communities that we're going to be working at. Okay, so we can move to the next one. So in terms of the Vpi tools, before the pandemic, we were able, we really use the Vpi tool to share information and to support the outreach activities that we have been doing. So for example, we rely on the website, we do some drone footage, our newsletter, and social media. They were very important to share that information. And also, besides the paper surveys, we were doing online surveys, web maps, some videos related the MPO, and we are also using QR codes. The map that I included here, it's an example of how we were using Vpi. So this map was on our website and was showing the locations where we had translated materials related with the LRTP. So for some communities, we will have 5 languages, whether Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Swahili. But not necessarily that was available in every single community based on their demographics of that community. For us, the real game changer before the pandemic was actually a peer exchange, just like this one, as part of the EDC5 series for small and medium-sized MPOs that happened in New London, Connecticut in November 2019. And the main topics on that peer exchange were specific about social media for MPOs, visualization techniques, and online meetings. So as part of that peer exchange, we were able to, as soon as we finished that, we were like, really pumped up. And we went back and talked with our commissioners, and we developed the social media terms of use, which we felt that we didn't have it and we really need it based on what we learned on this social media exchange, on this peer exchange. The other things that we learned on that peer exchange was the use of the Hootsuite. It's a social media management platform that also helped us organize all the social media content. We started using SketchUp. It's a free online tool for visualization. And we also started interviewing different town officials related with the hardware that they were using at their public meetings because they were broadcasting their meetings, so we wanted to have something similar, and we started to look at different options that we could procure to actually hardwire our conference room. Next one, please. So obviously during the pandemic, that kind of accelerated everything. So we had to pretty much change to a learn by doing type of approach. And that's when we started trying Zoom, GoToMeeting, Teams, any type of platform that came in our way. We were trying it. We were developing how-to guides to help our community partners on how to use those platforms. We developed protocols, scripts, splash screens, you name it. And then all of a sudden, we didn't need to hardwire our conference room, right? So for the fraction of the cost, we were able to do that. We decided to record the meetings and have them online for people to be able to watch it after the meeting was done at a later time. You can go to the next one. So for the purpose of the MPO and standing committees, the online meetings was working pretty fine, but we also decided to use other tools to engage people in other type of topics outside the MPO activities per se, and it's more related to the work that we do. So we started to develop dashboards with information, and we were sharing this link before the meeting, so people was able to check the information beforehand, and then at the meeting they could have more informed questions. The same way with the interactive web maps. That's the next slide. We use this web map. Larissa, if you can. Thank you. For a rural transportation study at the Cuervo Valley. And this was a study led by the Community Development Corporation at the Valley. And as part of the data collection that we did and the analysis that we provided, they were able to recently get some funds for intercity bus service connecting this town of Amherst with Worcester. And they are also looking at technologies for on-demand transit service for the Cuervo connector. The other tool that we use during this time is the Street Mix. This is a free online tool that we decided to use with some communities, especially with the walk audit in Lindian Lake neighborhood in Worcester. That was a process that took about 3 weeks. People were able to walk on their own on the study area. And then at the last meeting, we were talking a little bit about the options that they could have if they consider a complete streets approach in their community. And then these are the oldies but the goodies. We feel that we will never be able to get rid of the flyers, the newsletters, brochures, sending information to the radio stations and notices, because this is how people actually get more information, and then we can direct them to online options. And then moving forward, we will continue recording the meetings and have them available on the CMRPC on demand page. You can move to the next one. We are going to continue using different tools like the dashboards and web maps and online surveys. These are like proven techniques for us as of today. We are already using the OWL on the hybrid meetings. We created a new outreach coordinator position because we felt that we really needed more help on this area, more support. Because it requires a little bit more planning if you are going to do in-person and online as well. And then we are in the process of developing metrics to evaluate what's the best way to outreach different populations. We are really excited about the development of the PIMA tool at the Mass DOT level and the REACH application that Derek mentioned last week. And this is something that we really want to promote to all our member communities. And it is an opportunity for us to bridge the public participation process in all phases, planning, design, and construction. So we see a really good opportunity with those tools. And then about the things that we really want to try in the future are, we have here texting. That's something that we really want to explore and start using moving forward, especially to engage hard to reach individuals in some of our communities. The web maps that we are using are very stale, so we really want to have that interaction with the public. And some of you presented some examples of how to drop a pin in the maps and that type of things. That's something that we really want to try, as well as the study maps. We're looking at a social pinpoint as an online tool. I've seen co-organize, I think is similar to the co-organize online tool. So that's something that we're considering moving forward for the LRTP, the next long-range transportation plan iteration. But most of all, we really want to go out and start talking with people again on the ground, whether it is at the Commons, at the Senior Center, the English as a second language classes, the health fairs, you name it. We want to be there. If there's something happening, we really want to be there. So that's pretty much what I have for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. And that's my contact information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yahaira. So, well, let's wait and see if anybody has any questions they want to type into the chat pod, or again, feel free to raise your hand virtually and just unmute yourself to ask any questions. I guess I can get us started off with one question for you. You talked about experimenting with using Zoom and Teams, and I forget what the third one was. Have you settled on a specific one, or do you use specific, meeting platforms for specific purposes?
Yeah, so our agency bought different licenses for different platforms. Most often we use Zoom just because it allows for the breakout rooms, and also the closed captioning and that type of things. With the Teams, we are using it more for internal purposes. So if we have staff meetings and that type of things, we're using it more for ourselves rather than to share that with the public.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions for Yahaira? All right, well, thank you so much for your presentation. And
Thank you.
Again, back to Larissa for our next presentation.
So our next presentation is from the Greater Portland Council of Governments, and I'm also going to be sharing my screen for this one as well.
All right, thank you so much, Larissa. Is Marcel with me? There he is. All right. Well, thank you all for having us. We're really glad to be able to share our virtual public involvement and how we kind of try to keep it, how to make it inclusive, and how we've done that at GPCOG. So we're from Portland, Maine, Greater Portland Council of Governments. I work in outreach and communications, and I'm here with my coworker, Marcel Tagora. He works in planning and outreach. And so we're here to just kind of share with you kind of how we've kept our public involvement and virtual public involvement inclusive as we can through the pandemic. So in 2019, we started this program, and we just graduated this class of the Community Transportation Leaders Program, so CTL members, as you'll hear me say through this presentation. And so we started this program in 2019 to advance the inclusion of underrepresented communities in transportation planning and decision making. And so this is a group of 23 members, including older adults, people with disabilities, and people with limited English proficiency. And So it started with a training in 2019, followed by them breaking up into groups. So each group had a specific transportation concern they were advocating for. And so Marcel and I had once or twice a month what we called coaching sessions, where we were working with the group to see how we can continue advancing their projects. And so from the beginning of the planning stage of this program, we knew how important it was for us to make it inclusive due to the, the communities that we were working with and making sure the meeting practices were inclusive. And so when the pandemic hit, we were kind of put in a place that, how can we keep these members continue to stay engaged and make sure that they feel, from afar with the virtual setting, that they feel included and able to stay engaged. And so we had to kind of understand each member's different needs and what they had access to and go from there in terms of our support towards them. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. And so what Marcel and I were able to do was that we really kind of had to personalize our approach for each member. So for each member of the 23 members, we knew what their preferred or only communication method was. So whether it was emails, phone calls, WhatsApp, for each of them, we knew exactly how to work with them. And so Marcel and I tag teamed, even if it was a mass email that we wanted to send out, then we would have certain people be reached out by WhatsApp or phone call. And so through this, we were able to have kind of a personalized, or a one-on-one conversation with them, especially through a time where we were all far apart. And that's how we were able to kind of keep people engaged. And we were able to do this for many reasons. Of course, it's a program. And so our staff availability and the fact that we were able to get CARES Act funding through this, and we were able to give more time and support through that way. And also a huge asset for us is the fact that Marcel speaks a few languages. And so we have a few members in our group that have limited English proficiency. And so we're able to keep them in whatever groups they wanted to be in and fully be able to be a part of the groups. And Marcel would do live interpretation for those smaller group meetings and then for our all group meetings. And so Marcel will talk more about that.
Thank you, Kat, and good morning, everyone. So I'm going to focus on before meetings, the way we worked hard to keep this community of underrepresented community engaged virtually during the pandemic. So first of all, we focused on communicating with the community transportation leaders to make sure we understand what their barriers are so that we can be able to provide the support they needed. Also, we always show them that we are ready and ready to accommodate their barriers, and we avoid anything that can constitute a barrier, especially like something that can require them to sign up or to put in some passwords. And also, we always offer to open meetings, to start meetings like 15 minutes before. This way, community transportation leaders can reach out to us and can say, hey, please, I'm having trouble joining the meeting. This way, we're able to help them during these 15 minutes before meetings start. Next slide, please. So, and during the meetings, we always outline the ground rules or the meeting guidelines, asking people, for example, those in the meeting who are able to join video conferencing to raise their hands using the icons, but also those calling in, we always tell them, if you want to raise your hand, because everyone is not technology savvy, some of our CTL members, community transportation leaders, are not able to have a smartphone or computer. They use cell phones. So we provide the number, even when we send out meeting invite or meeting link, we tell them, we specify you can click here, you can call this number. So this way, they are able, they understand that for them to, it's more simple and easier to click and join the meeting. So during the meeting, then we tell them, you can please feel free to, you can press 9* if you want to raise your hand. And also we encourage people to spell out the acronyms so that everyone, those who are not seeing or watching this presentation like this, or who cannot hear, people with who are hard of hearing, with hard of hearing problems, can be able to understand what the presenter or people speaking are saying. And also we provide live interpretation. I help them because we have people with limited English proficiency. I do live interpretation during meetings like this, and we always remind people to speak slowly and also to remember to pause so that I can be able to provide interpretation service to those who cannot hear or speak English. And also, when we do webinars, we sometimes, because of time, we do side calls with the community transportation leaders who are interested in joining specific webinars, and then tell them, ask them to, we do interpretation on the side instead of making meeting longer. And also we ensure accessibility of our documents because we know some people are visually impaired. So we make sure everything that we produce, the handout document that we share with the community transportation leaders, are compliant web content accessibility guidelines, and also they are screen reader compliant. Next slide, please. So we have a couple community transportation leaders who joined our regional committee, transportation committee. We do coaching one-on-one sessions to help them, and we go over the agenda so that they can feel comfortable because they are new on these committees. And also during the meetings, we make sure we have a staff in the meeting so that he can be able to chat with them, send text messages whenever they feel like they need something, they have a question or need a specific answer, then they can text you, and then you can give them the answer they need. Go ahead to next slide, please. So overall, we were able to do this as Kat specified. The purpose for the program was just to make sure underrepresented communities are also empowered and play a role in the transportation planning and decision-making process. So this was able because of our openness to be always open to and ready to provide support that people need and to understand them. When we were open and ready to provide the support they needed, it communicated kind of feeling that they are valued and then also they are needed on the table. The other thing is understanding diversity. The concept of diversity is very important. That's when we were able to provide the support because everyone is different. But diversity, someone once said that diversity is like being invited to a party, but inclusion is like being given a floor to dance. So this way we were able to keep our folks, our community transportation leaders engaged and active, and they felt engaged and valued. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, feel free to ask it.
Thank you. so much, both Catherine and Marcel. I'm so glad that we are recording these presentations because I want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to listen to you and all the really important points that you raised. There are a couple I wanted to sort of draw particular attention to, or at least I have some personal thoughts on that. You know, if you had a point on one of your slides, Marcel, talking about you know, accommodations in terms of font size and color and things like that. And you know, that's definitely another thing that it's so important to keep in mind, because you know, as we're talking about all these exciting tools that are visual and that might be more engaging for somebody who has no vision impairment, we can't leave behind those people for whom that is, you know, not going to be effective at all. So you know, people who are colorblind, who have other visual impairments, we need to keep them in mind and make sure that the materials that we prepare also can accommodate their needs. So, you know, I was really happy to see that in your presentation. The other thing is, you know, we did a virtual peer exchange last year as part of EDC 5 for in New York, and I'm just pointing this out because, you know, even as a Federal Highway Administration, as a team that's working on virtual public involvement, we still have so much to learn, and we still have a long way to go in terms of how we accommodate others. So for when we sent out the notice about this peer exchange, we did have a you know, a couple of sentences in the invitation asking those who need special accommodations to please let us know in advance. And you know, we didn't receive any this time around, but you know, for that New York peer exchange, we hadn't started doing that yet. And so on the second day of the peer exchange, I had 2 individuals contact me and let me know that they were have visual impairments, that it was really difficult for them to, you know, navigate and click to enter a breakout room and click to switch back. And it was just so frustrating for them. So, you know, it's really important that we do, you know, reach out to the community beforehand and let them know that we want to provide these accommodations and give them the opportunity to let us know what they need so that we can be prepared. So those were just my thoughts, I guess, in terms of what Catherine and Marcel were sharing. And I'd love to hear any questions or other thoughts from anybody else, any of the participants here. Yeah, so if you weren't following the chat, Catherine and Marcel, I hear a lot of very complimentary comments here for your presentation, but I don't see any questions. So with that, I'd like to thank you both again for telling us about the work that you've been doing, and I'll hand things back to Larissa for our next presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next presentation is from the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee RPC, and I've made you a presenter, so you can go ahead and share your screen.
All right. Is everyone able to see this? Just want a confirmation that folks can see my screen.
Looks good.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Alex Belenz. I'm a planner with the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission. We cover the New Hampshire side of the Upper Valley region that straddles the Vermont-New Hampshire border. We are mostly a fairly rural region. We have 3 towns that have more than 10,000 population. Most of our towns are under 5,000 residents. But we also have the largest employer in New Hampshire, Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center and Dartmouth College. And so you could describe us as a busy rural region, if that makes sense. We've got a lot of folks coming in and out. And I'm going to share today 2 examples. One is kind of a more local example of a project that we did with the City of Lebanon. And then I'll talk a little bit about what we did for our long-range transportation plan, or what we are doing for that plan update, which I dropped a spoiler in the chat earlier on that was mentioned, but I'll still plan to go over that briefly. So I wanted to talk about a survey effort that we did with the city of Lebanon, New Hampshire, for the Mascoma River Greenway. This is a fairly new rail trail that once complete will connect the two major hubs in Lebanon, West Lebanon and downtown. Before 2018, there was no safe or accessible pedestrian or bike connection connecting those two sides of town. And so starting last winter, or I guess 2 winters ago, there was a need to understand, now that the trail has been open for about 2 years, we need to understand who's using the trail, what their experiences are like, how they're getting there, and even more importantly, who's not using the trail and why not. And we had planned to do some in-person survey intercepts, go out there with a clipboard, every 5th person who passes by, you'd try to intercept them and have them take a brief survey and understand their experience. Then when the pandemic hit, it obviously made us rethink that approach. And it also provided a space to think about, okay, so we kind of defaulted to this approach where this is how you would normally do a trail survey, but who are we missing with that type of survey administration approach? Like we're probably going to get a lot of people who use the trail frequently. We're probably missing a lot of the people who use the trail less frequently, and we're not getting the people who don't use the trail at all, and they have a valuable perspective. So we decided it was going to be, probably a multi-phase program of research. We were going to do some sort of online survey. We were going to, at some point, try to do something in person, which we haven't done yet. And we want to make sure, once we learn who we have talked to and haven't talked to through those first 2 efforts, what populations are we missing? How do we get their perspective? So I want to share a bit about what we did for the virtual survey and talk a little bit about what we were going to do next. We used a platform called Metroquest, which has been made available to all the New Hampshire RPCs and MPOs by New Hampshire DOT. It's kind of a unique platform. It's basically, they give you these 5 panels. They're very strict about how long your surveys can be, and they provide all these different tools in there to do something that's a little bit more interactive than your basic survey. So part of the opportunity with this was to ask some questions that reach people and ask some questions that we might not be able to get answered through a traditional in-person intercept survey. We did, I'll click through this just to show you a little bit about the survey instrument, and then I'll show you what we did for this, presenting the survey results. We did provide a more traditional alternative survey with most of the same questions for folks who maybe just had trouble reading or interpreting the more interactive survey here, or if there were technological limitations, although we didn't hear too much about folks having issues. So I'm just going to click through the panels that we have here. Metroquest does allow you to ask kind of traditional survey questions, so multiple choice, open-ended questions. And so there was some kind of baseline information we wanted to get about what are you using the trail for, how do you use it in different seasons, what's your overall experience been like in terms of feeling safe or enjoyment, providing a space for folks to provide an open-ended answer. How are you getting to the trail, and what might be some of the barriers that are limiting access to the trail if you wanted to walk or bike to get there? Are you using the trail as more of a recreational facility, or using it to get to destinations? And then what is the value of the trail to the community that you feel? And we got a lot of interesting information for this open-ended question. And from there, we made it a little bit more interactive, and we actually got a lot of great feedback about folks really enjoying this part of the survey. So we wanted to know how people are getting on and off the trail. There's some formal access points, there's some informal access points, there's some access points that are through private property that some issues have been raised at. And so Metroquest allows you to drop these pins on here. So if you might say, I start on the east end of the trail, this is my current access point, and it pulls up a little survey. You can say yes or no, this is my primary access point, and are there any issues? So if you have an issue, you might say, like many people have said, that this is an unsafe intersection for people to get through walking or biking, which is true. We also had similar pins that could be dropped for desired access points or access barriers. So we got a lot of good information through this, especially from folks who maybe are using the trail less than they would want. what we learned is that folks were not necessarily very careful with where they put these. And so the comment form on these was really helpful to kind of dig into what people were trying to, what they were trying to say or what trying to communicate. And then we did, we wanted to understand people's priorities for trail improvements. And we wanted to do it in a way that reflected, to some level, real world conditions, in that, there's only so much money and capacity and resources. So we had them do a budget exercise through this. So one of the projects that is being developed is a further extension of the Greenway into West Lebanon. But there's other needs or desires or projects that have been identified. So for each of them, we listed 7 projects or kind of budgetary priorities that we had heard from folks, provided a little extra detail about what those might be. And then we basically gave people 100 Greenway bucks to kind of build their budget, to say, if you had 100 Greenway bucks to spend on the Greenway, how would you spend the money? And so from there, we're able to present some of those real world trade-offs of, yes, there is ultimately a limited pot of money we can spend on the trail. And then for a wrap up, the Metroquest gives you some demographic questions. So we were able to separate respondents out by town, age, income, and got some more information about how they heard about the trail. And we solicited people to provide their contact info if they wanted to volunteer. And to get this out, we did the best we could in the kind of the early stages of the pandemic. So this was spring into summer 2020, a bit of a crazy time, obviously, but we did work with some of the local libraries and human service agencies, as well as some of the traditional distribution channels. And our goal was really to try to reach as much of the underserved population as possible through this, despite knowing that internet access would be a problem. We knew we would learn about who we did and didn't reach through this process near the end, and that would inform some of our future efforts to kind of round out our data set and round out the program of research. And in terms of getting our results out to the community, instead of presenting a report, we created a more interactive dashboard. So this was a local resident built this using GitHub, which is great. We rely a lot on those types of that type of partnership. We're a pretty small staff here, so having that partnership was great. And through this platform, we figured this is a little more accessible and interesting for the average user than kind of your typical PDF report. So we were able to break down our kind of demographic results and have different topic areas across the top. So for example, this is the table for that budget question. So we call this investment priorities in the trail. And we're able to see pretty clearly, most folks, if given that 100 Greenway bucks, would spend a lot of the money on extending the trail. But we also learned from this question and others that people really appreciated the maintenance that's been done on the trail to keep it as a smooth level surface. We also learned that despite our efforts, we really oversampled folks who were making higher incomes. And so again, when we to complete this program of research, it's going to have to be targeted towards lower income populations to get a more balanced perspective to complete that and get that true, full, well-rounded data set. So we definitely learned a lot from this approach, and we learned a lot from folks who I think we would have missed and during that typical in-person sampling. For example, we got the majority of respondents in the summer said that they used the trail about once a week. So, depending on how many sampling days we'd have, we might have missed a lot of those folks. We did hear a lot about different access barriers, if I can find the response. So from folks, who maybe not be using the trail, that, they didn't feel safe walking or biking on the roads around the trail. So that was a priority as well. So we were encouraged by overall what we got out of this process. And again, it has been a theme throughout today, but we see it as part of the whole program of research for this trail. This is not the end all be all, but it did allow us to get some information and connect with some people who we probably wouldn't have doing that typical survey administration approach. So I wanted to share about that project, and then I did want to share about our long-range transportation plan update, which we're calling our regional corridor transportation plan. The bulk of the work for this plan has come during the pandemic as well. And our approach was really to kind of try a lot of different things and see what worked as far as getting people engaged. And on this hub page that we've made through ArcGIS Online has really become the hub for our public engagement efforts virtually. And so what we've done is we've broken up our region by highway corridors and pushed out different surveys to different communities based on which highway corridor goes through their community. So these are simple 5-minute surveys that folks can take to provide input on that. And we found that this has been a helpful way to kind of break down the region into something that's a little more digestible for the average resident. But what we've really liked and really found success with, this is something I mentioned earlier, is using this interactive mapping platform. So we have this available here on the website for anybody who wants to, can drop a pin on here, type in a comment about a transportation related need or issue that they have seen or experienced on kind of major roadways or downtown areas or out by their house in front of the across the region. But we've also used this as kind of the backbone for our virtual public forums. So what we've done with those is invited people to come, had people, get an order by raising their hands, and kind of had a back and forth with that person to identify and drill down what that issue is. And meanwhile, we're navigating through the map, dropping these pins down, recording comments, and our goal is to really build this map out as much as we can. And you'll see this map is where you have a lot of pins is reflective of our population centers, as well as where we have done our outreach efforts yet. So we haven't done much of anything on, this is Route 120 between Lebanon and Claremont, where we're going to start running an express bus pretty soon, which is great. We haven't done much of any public outreach for there, and it is a pretty rural corridor, so we just haven't gotten hardly any input so far, but we'll be pushing that out over the summer. While we've done pretty much covered Lebanon and Hanover, which is our main population center. And so we've gotten quite a bit of input already through here. So this has been really useful. People have said that they've enjoyed using it, and it's something that is going to be really useful for us in the future to be able to kind of point back to as a resource. We may, at the end of this plan, we may wipe it clean and start it over again as we build towards the next plan update. But we're happy to have this platform available to us now. And it does solve a problem for us as a rural region where we have 27 communities. Many of them are very small. For these regional types of efforts, it is challenging to meet folks where they're at because of how dispersed our populations are. So even if we kind of canvass the region with in-person public events, even if we did quite a few of them, there's still people who might have to drive a few towns over to get to those, and that is a significant barrier for many reasons that I don't need to explain. So having this as a way to augment those in-person meetings, which we're going to return to, will be very useful for us going forward with any work that we do regionally. So we're pretty excited about the use of this tool for our purposes. And I think that's everything I wanted to cover.
Thanks so much, Alex. You actually have a question in the chat from Betsy about, I think this was, she popped it in when you were talking about Metroquest. How does this tool address language needs?
Yeah, so there is an option in there to use a Spanish or other language options. And we didn't end up using it for this one. Partially because we didn't have the resource available to do an adequate translation. So when we were pushing this survey out, we asked folks to let us know if there was a language barrier and that we would work with them to try to solve that. But we didn't have the resources available to us in-house, which was a learning experience for us to say, this is something we need to get better at. But we didn't have to do an adequate translation for the survey instrument itself. So it was something that we kind of bumped up against and said, yeah, next time we do this, we have to figure out a way to do it better. But it is an option within the Metroquest platform.
Thank you. And thanks, Alex, for sort of giving us a live demo of some of the capabilities. I have some sort of related questions because you said that this was being made available, being shared by New Hampshire DOT. And so I was wondering, I did want to point that out as something that a lot of smaller agencies often say, oh, well, we with our budget, we can't afford the licensing for this or that tool. So I think this is a great example of a larger organization like your state DOT partnering and I've heard of other sort of MPOs and COGs banding together to sort of share licenses for some of these tools. In terms of what was provided by New Hampshire DOT, it looks like there's definitely a learning curve involved with the use of Metroquest. So in addition just kind of making the platform available for your use, that they also provide other training resources?
Yeah, that's all. Metroquest runs that, and they do have periodic. They have a lot of good resources on their website. They have a whole like wiki set up where there's for each of these different slide types, of which there are dozens more than what you see here. They have a page on how to use that. And there are a couple little bugs that you have to kind of learn how to navigate in my experience, but the trainings that Metroquest puts on are very helpful. And yeah, to second that, we as an organization would not have been able to afford the license for this on our own. And so it was the partnership with DOT was critical for us to be able to use this.
Great. I see, Lucy, you sort of popped in. I was wondering if you had something to add.
Yeah, I would agree with Alex. We're using it to develop a survey for the 10-year plan and that. But they had an earlier version and they made some tweaks to it. They've been responsive to comments and questions that I've made. And if I have an issue with something, I send them an email, and they're generally very responsive. They do send out a guide as the RPCs want to participate. They're signed on to our account essentially, and then they send them out what they call their handbook, and then you can read the handbook. They do have online resources. Yes, indeed, like with everything, there's little tweaks to things you got to learn, and it's been a learning curve for me as well. But as like anything, as you do it, you get better at it, and we're going to be using it for different things. So I appreciate Alex doing the presentation on it as well, but it has been a good resource.
Okay, and thank you, Lucy. Scott also pointed out that Metroquest has a group set up consisting of state transportation agencies. So thanks again, Alex, for your presentation. I think a lot of people who aren't as familiar with Metroquest might be interested in learning about this. So really appreciate that. I wanted to thank you all for your participation today. We are running toward the end of our time. Kevin is going to bring up a poll everywhere poll, so we can get your thoughts on what your key takeaways are from today's session. And so just remembering that you can connect with that Poll Everywhere website page from the link in the chat pod, and then just enter in your key takeaways from today. But I think, Kevin, you and Larissa have been taking notes, I know. So what have been your key takeaways from all the great presentations today?
Yeah, I guess I'll get it started, but I'm curious what everyone else thinks too. Something that really resonated with me, I think, throughout the day was that in-person still matters. We're talking about virtual public involvement right now, but that doesn't mean that the tried and true techniques are of any less value. And similarly, even within the world of virtual public involvement, there's no single technique or strategy that's likely to meet everyone's needs. So just like, even before agencies really were using a lot of virtual techniques, that was the case in in-person meetings as well, or in-person techniques. Need a variety of techniques to meet everyone's needs and give everyone a real authentic opportunity to participate, and that's true with VPI as well. When it comes to underserved communities, I think this is, again, not new information, but it applies differently in a virtual context, that we need to put in extra efforts to reach everyone for a variety of different reasons, and it's different for different groups. It's always best to meet people where they are, and that might mean in person or it might mean online. For certain groups, they're more often online than they come to like a community meeting. But that enlisting community members to help with outreach efforts can be effective. Paying for people's time when you're asking them to give significant time has been effective for some agencies. I think kind of recognizing that we might be starting from a difficult place in terms of trust and history and past wrongs, and really recognizing that and taking the time that it takes to try to repair some of that past damage. I was impressed with many of the examples of agencies that are really embracing limited English proficiency and being proactive to make sure that language is not a big barrier. So I was really impressed with some of those, but also thinking when we're thinking about underserved communities, not just thinking about low income and minority, which is the definition in the executive order, but going beyond that, thinking about rural populations, seniors, youth, people with less broadband access. I think that was another big thing. That's really being more inclusive in our definition of which type of populations might have barriers to participating. One, I think, really key point that Tina made was make sure that you document your methods. Make sure that you're writing down what you're doing so that if that information is ever needed later, you have that documentation. And I think another key point that Carolyn made that I really liked was, we want to make sure we're giving people opportunities to tell us what they really care about, what really matters to them. And we have our own agendas as planners, as transportation agencies, but that doesn't mean that it's always going to line up with what people really want to tell us, and we need to give space for that. So I've been talking for a while. I have a few more, but I'm going to let Larissa see if she has anything to add to this, and then we can also take a look at what's coming in the poll and open it up to the group. Larissa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so just going over kind of what people had mentioned in the Mentimeter poll, there are a lot of different traditionally underserved groups and communities in each of the jurisdictions, and of the ones that I wrote down, obviously those don't include everything. So there's refugees, low-income populations, the elderly, the youth, persons with disabilities, and the list goes on. And so you have to use different strategies to engage each of these different stakeholder groups. And some of these methods are local media, direct mail, ESL classes, social media, really looking back to meeting people where they are. And then there are also some big challenges with engaging underserved populations, like lack of communication in the local community and time constraints. And then there's some important considerations for ensuring virtual meetings are accessible for people who need special accommodations, like closed captioning, live interpretation, which we also saw in Greater Portland COG's presentation as well. And there are some successful methods that prove to be beneficial for engaging underserved communities, like sharing meeting information in libraries with neighborhood associations and groups, communicating with local advocacy groups and transit agencies. Yeah, so a lot of great ideas came from the Mentimeter poll.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of great takeaways from today. Yeah. The list is quite long, and that's a great thing. Yeah. One thing I didn't mention, it's at the top of this poll, though, is the suggestion about using the transportation or the dump as a community engagement site, which I think may not have come to a surprise to some of you in New England who work more in these rural communities that don't have trash pickup, but I think was a really notable one for some of us.
All right, so thank you all for your great thoughts on the key takeaways. Of course, this is only the second of our 4 days. So, keep a lookout for communications from us in advance of day 3, where we'll be talking about project visualizations, and Zach Whitney from Utah DOT will be talking with us about do-it-yourself videos and leading us through an interactive exercise where we'll be making use of the breakout rooms in MS Teams. So lots more to come. And thank you all for your participation today. I think we have some great discussions, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great day, everyone.